Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to another exciting edition of Color Me Poetry. This evening, it is my honor and my pleasure to welcome Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. He's the author of the textbook, workbook for victims of white supremacy. It's the short title, and Mr. Fuller has lectured extensively. He's traveled and spoken many places around the country, and I'd like to take this time to welcome Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. Welcome, sir.
Good evening.
Let's talk about your book, your workbook, textbook for victims of white supremacy. You started writing in the 50s, and you started when you were in the war, is that right?
No, actually it was, I first started thinking about it during the so-called Little Rock crisis at the Central High School there. And I was thinking about the terms that were being used, racial segregation, racial integration, and that became the focal point for my whole concept of the approach to racism, that the words are very important. And this became very important right at the beginning, that the words are being used, racial integration, racial segregation. What does this mean? What is racism? So over a period of time, I've taken notes that evolved into a book. It came to mean, to me, using what I call compensatory counter-racist logic, white supremacy. White supremacy is racism. Racism is white supremacy. That they are synonymous because there possibly could be, in theory, other forms of racism, but that became the dominant form. And it grew out, according to using the same compensatory logic, it grew out of a need for a form of royalism on the part of a segment of the white population of the world.
That's very important that you say that, because most time when we think of racism, most people who use the term racism don't associate it with white supremacy.
No, it's associated very loosely with all forms of what people call bigotry, discrimination, prejudice. Actually, these words should not be within the context of what we call racism in order to provide focus to what you're talking about. When you use words like bigotry, discrimination, prejudice, racial segregation, these words do not accurately describe what you're really talking about as a function. As a function. The function is a system of white supremacy in all 9 areas of activity. That's economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war. Now, these areas define what people do, or it addresses what people do. People are always involved in one or more of these areas of activity throughout the planet. That's all of the white and non-white people in the known universe. So the white supremacists, evidently, the people who first started out, thought of an idea of switching the old royal system, where you used to call it serfs, etc., switching that system to a system based on color. And it turned out to be one of the grandest and most powerful ideas, if not the most powerful idea, for manipulating people ever conceived. And it has been quite prosperous along those lines. It does get things done, but at a great cost of the mistreatment of people.
So that's very important that you put it that way, because it does, mistreatment of people of color around the world. And that's not something to be taken lightly. But sometimes we, as I said earlier, we don't think of it, racism and white supremacy in the same breath. And that's part of the brainwash. That's part of
the strategy of the white supremacists themselves. Now, that doesn't say that all white people practice white supremacy, but all white people are expected to participate. And those who are not willing to participate run into problems with those who are willing to participate. And sometimes great fights down through history have broken out because of this. But those who believe in the system of white supremacy are far more powerful and smarter than those who don't.
I noticed on the back of your book there's a statement that says if you don't understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, everything you understand will serve to confuse you. What do you mean by that?
Right. If you don't understand what white supremacy is and how it works, everything else that you understand will confuse you, because that is the dominant motivating force among the people of the known universe, as it is today, in all of the 9 areas of activity. And it means that the white people who have decided to take part in this form of royalism, meaning racism, white supremacy, want people to fall in line behind it, and have actually done so. Now those who don't, the white people who don't, they run into great difficulty. The non-white people, whether they are in direct contact with white people or not, they fall under the system, because the system takes in everything that people do every minute of every day, every place in the known universe. And if you don't understand this system, you won't understand anything else that's going on.
Is there any such thing really as black racists or black racists or black supremacy? Because you hear people say those kind of things, particularly white people who call into radio stations and say, well, I think he's a black supremacist or he's a racist. Can black people be racist? Can people of color be racist?
Not within the system of white supremacy. That's one thing about understanding the entire system. The system of white supremacy as a system, as a total system, has to be understood, that it is indeed a total system. Therefore, someone who is subject to the system, which is any person, black, brown, red, or yellow, who is subject to the system, non-white people, cannot be subject to the system and be not subject to the system at the same time. You can't be a black supremacist and be subject to white supremacy at the same time. It is impossible. That can't be done. You cannot be a prisoner and a warden at the same time.
No, not possible.
You may aspire to be, which you shouldn't be, since the objective of counter-racism, which is what the book is about, is to produce peace and justice. Then you're not trying to establish another form of racism. You're trying to eliminate the form of racism that is in place.
So